I want to start by commending our wrestlers and coaches on a fine season. Really, one of the better seasons we've had here in Colorado for wrestling. I want to thank John and Sandy, our committee and the tournament committee for their fine work this season. It takes a tremendous amount of work to put on our wrestling season and our state tournament. So thank you to everybody for everything you've done. I want to welcome our new committee members that we have. I believe Desiree's online. Hi, Desiree. David Laughlin from Canyon City.
He's on vacation.
Okay. JJ's online. JJ, welcome. Tony Mastari from Eaton is here. And Chris James from Pueblo South will be joining us here in a little bit. So we've got a decently full agenda today, so we'll just keep moving through there. As always, committee members, if you want to add some input, please make sure you let us know. If we start running, here into maybe 10, 15, 10:30, we'll take a quick break for everyone to get up, move around, collect some more coffee and water if we need to. And then I'm just going to take a few minutes just to kind of go back over our committee policies and what we do here for our committee. So remember, our purpose of the committee is to put forth a recommendation for the rules that govern wrestling for the state of Colorado to the Legislative Council. The Legislative Council is the governing body that votes on all of our rules implementations for the state. So today we will put forth our recommendation to the Legislative Council for them to vote on in April. As a reminder, just in general, we do not oversee the specific details of how the state tournament itself operates. That's really John's role and his designees on the tournament committee that put that on. We can offer some feedback and some suggestions. We're a great voice for that because obviously, coaches, you live in the trenches and you see how that goes. And then he'll take that feedback in and work on that. And just know that's the general rule of any assistant commissioner. It's their job to make sure those events go off and go well. They know all the specific details between the budget and the finances and, the staffing and all of those things where we don't know those finite details. Our representation is a cross section of Colorado. Really, it's a very diverse geographic state. So we have people from all parts of the state. We have bigger classifications, smaller classifications on our committee so that we can get a voice from everybody across the state. Just to remember that our charge today is to put together the best rules we can for the state of Colorado. And so at times it may not necessarily be the best thing just for the 2A school, or it may not be the best thing for the 5A school, but we're trying to put together that set of rules that are going to govern in the best way we can for all of the state. We do try to make sure that we honor what's currently in here and honor the past as we move forward in a sustainable and intentional manner. Obviously, we've gotten to where we are with wrestling in the state of Colorado from a lot of hard work from a lot of individuals over the years. And so, if something's in here and we're not sure why it is, just remember that there's a reason why it got put in to begin with. And then if we are going to make some changes and move forward, let's just try and think through those things, make sure they're intentional and sustainable as we move forward. My role is really to oversee our committee meeting, the kind of the procedures and the processes and things like that. Obviously, I can have a voice as well, but just know my voice is just the same as yours here in this room. John's role, obviously, he sees the day-to-day and does all of the pieces and governs the rules for us from the CHSAA office. He has a voice here as well. John does not have a vote when we go to do our voting. Neither do I. I only vote in case there's a tie. So if there's a tie, then I will vote to break that tie. But John does not have a vote in our committee as we are the ones creating those rules. Again, your job is to speak up and to make sure your voice is heard as your representative on this committee. Know that an absence of any kind of comment in this room means that you agree with what we're doing. Okay? If you do not feel we're moving in the right direction, please make sure that you speak up and make your voice heard. a reminder on our voting procedures. We'll have a couple of things that potentially could have a vote today. Just remember that any committee can make a motion to be put forth to be voted on by the committee. It has to be seconded by somebody else in the room to trigger a vote. And when I say in the room, I also mean our folks online as well. They're welcome to make a motion or second a motion. At that point, we'll have discussion. If we need to clarify the motion, we can, but we can have discussion, and then we'll call for a vote, and a simple majority will pass or fail the motion. Again, I vote just to break a tie. If there are multiple motions, maybe on the same topic, just know that the most present one, the current one that was voted on, takes precedence over any previous votes. So if there is some conflict there, the one that's most current takes precedence. All right. Any questions on our procedures today and how we move forward and kind of what the charge of the committee is? No? Okay. Sandra, do you want to take roll here before we get going? Okay.
Okay, Travis.
I am here.
Jason Humphrey. Here. Rachel Salas. Here. Curtis Wentz.
Here.
Ron Ordovez.
Here.
Don Haddad. Yep. Don Haddad. He's online. Desiree Kendall online.
Here.
David is out of the country. JJ Barron's online. Pat DeCamillis, is he online? Okay. Sean from Rocky Ford, perfect. Rusty Johnson from Alamosa. John Watson is online, joining right now. Brittany Hudson from Bennett, perfect. Tony Lestari, and Chris James is on his way.
Okay, thank you. Also, just to kind of let the committee know, this is recorded and it is broadcast out on YouTube for all of our coaches to be listening in. So welcome, coaches. Again, congratulations on a fine season. All right. So at some point, I do believe Mr. Kruger will be in to address us and chat with us about some things. But we'll go ahead and start rolling into our reports. Our Officials Association president is not here yet. So we will move on, and I don't see it in here, but I think we're going to go with our CHSAA update next. Tom, are you good and ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here. As we get going, we got our all-state nominations going out for our seniors at CSU Pueblo, and it went well. I want to thank CHSAA for allowing us again to give out our coaches awards at the end of the tournament. It went real well again. The award winners were Cutter Garrettson from Cedar Ridge. That was 2A. 3A was a co-winners with Rusty Johnson, present here, and Chad Cox from Brush. Our 4A winner, so I'm trying to remember them all. Who was our 4A? Trying to remember him. No, was it Tyler? Trying to remember, I should have wrote it down. Shoot, it's my apologies. I should have wrote them down. And then 5A, it'll come to me too there. 5A was Sam Frederico from Pomona. The girls was Pueblo Central for 5A or 4A. Chris from Pueblo Central, and then Aware from Grand Junction Central was the 5A girls. Yeah, I'm just drawing a blank on the 4A. I'll have to come back to it. You're supposed to help me out, Tony. I know. But again, it went well. I want to thank you. Thank everybody. Thank CHSAA. Thank John and Sandy for helping us out on that. And any questions, please give me a call about the senior all-state games. Our director should be sending it out to the coaches members to vote on our seniors to be present at the Senior All-State in June, the 12th and 13th, again, in CSU Pueblo. Other than that, we're good to go.
Just want to make sure that we say we appreciate the partnership we have with the Coaches Association. Any coaches out there, if you're not a part of the Coaches Association, I highly recommend that you become a member. They put on a clinic every year that is well done. And, just the benefits you receive from that and what your athletes can get through the all-state games and, their mentoring program and those kinds of things, that it's a great partnership to have and a great organization to be a part of. So like I said, if you're not a member, I would definitely look into that and speak with your athletic director about becoming a member. All right, we'll roll into some CHSAA updates first. So we're on item 5 on your agenda. And so we'll turn it over to John to talk about the weight permit bylaw.
Sure. I'm just going to introduce it right now. We will vote on it a little bit later, but this is something that was presented to the Board of Directors, the CHSAA Board of Directors. Hopefully you had a chance to look at this. Again, we'll go into a little bit more detail later. This is a bylaw, I think, that has not been updated since we've turned over to track wrestling. Unless there's some feedback from the group that it needs to remain put, which we will discuss later, I would recommend that this is something we move forward with when we get there. The second thing we're going to talk about, clock updates. After talking to Travis, is probably not something we need to talk about this year because there are no clock updates in terms of classification. I will mention right now, there was a very large discussion at the tournament regarding what were deemed district programs and the enrollment numbers that a district program would have. I will say this, in terms of what our office looks like, there are 2 types of programs. There's a school program, for example, Platte Valley may have a program, and then there is a co-op program. There really is no such thing as a district program. A district can create a program by bringing in all the schools within that district and creating a co-op, and there's no limit with the number of schools that can do that. And Desiree's program is something like that. The concerns were about schools that have kids coming in from outside of their district. That is something that is more of a state statute than a CHSAA bylaw. When kids attend a school that do not have a program, they are allowed to attend a school within their district of residence or district of attendance. If neither of those exist, they can then attend a school that is a district that is contiguous or bounding where they are. Okay. For us to change something along those lines, and I know it certainly affects who can participate where, we would need to work with the state to make some changes for that. So it's not as simple as just a bylaw adjustment. I will say this, the conversation is occurring at the Board of Directors level for CHSAA to see what we can do. Are there issues with it? For sure. But what we need to make sure that we understand is we don't want to take opportunities away from kids. And I know nobody wants that. It's just, how do we count those kids within a program? That is a little bit more difficult said than done. As most of you are probably aware, when we do classifications, we do those prior to a cycle. A school may not know they're getting 4 or 5 kids until the season starts. Right. So it's a little bit difficult. It's something, again, we're trying to work with, but it's not something that can just change overnight. So just wanted to mention that. So
also, okay. Just so the committee knows, our committee doesn't handle any clock placements or anything like that. That's all done through the clock committee and the legislative council process. And also be aware that next year is the count year. So those things that has been pushed back due to some bylaw changes last year, council. So all of the classifications that were in place this year are in place for next year. And then next year is when the reclassification process will take place for the 26-28 cycle. Okay. All right. Moving on. Anything with those updates, questions, comments, concerns from the committee? All right. Moving on to item 7. This will be pleasant news for everybody to hear, but we're going to return to our regular dates for 2026. So I'll let John touch base on that as well.
We'll return to our regular dates. So, as we probably remember last year, we had to move some dates due to some occurrences at Ball Arena, totally out of our control. In talking to them, they didn't see any issues with us returning to our original date. I will say this, that moving forward, this issue should not happen again. And it happened in the first place because of the use of the NFHS calendar. We have worked and people in our office have worked to predict what years that would occur again. And we will have something in place where we won't have to deal with that again. So our regional dates will be February 13th and 14th. And our state dates will be the 19th through the 21st. I will say this, after this meeting, I do plan on communicating out to coaches, just a summary of this meeting, just so they're aware of happenings for next year. I will put in this communication that for next year, maybe different than this current year, tournament dates, when we're figuring those out, should be counted backwards from the state tournament so that we're all consistent with how we do things. So, and that's it.
Okay. Want to just thank all of the coaches and everybody out there for their flexibility this year. Obviously not an ideal situation with us having to move things up for Ball Arena's availability, but just want to tell everybody we appreciate their flexibility and getting things done. So glad that we'll be back to our regular dates and a regular length of season next year. All right, moving on to item 8, just a review of our regional and state seating procedures that we use this year. At this point, again, I think that's just kind of in there for you to review and look at. I have heard no comments from anybody suggesting we need to change anything from our regional and state seating. So, it's in the packet for you to look at so that you're familiar with it. I know most of you are, but really, are there any questions or concerns with that before we move forward? Tom?
Just one as a coach, for regional seating, why don't we use 5th and 6th placers since we award them?
So originally, it was in here that it was a state qualifier. And because 5th and 6th place did not qualify for state, they were not used in the seating. And so that's how it was written into there. And I believe is that still how it's written in here, is returning state qualifier?
And that's which is my
Yep.
question, 5th and 6th. The reason is because of our challenge matches,
Mhm.
especially between that 4th and 5th, where they're now in the tournament, they're flip-flopping
Right.
on the podium.
Mhm.
So that was my concern, give them some seating criteria when we come back to regional.
Mhm.
This is the only reason for 5th and 6th.
Does everyone follow what Tom's alluding to here? Yeah. So again, if that's something that the committee wants to change, we can have a motion and do that. If you would look at, if you want to go to returning regional place instead of state qualifier, that is something we can definitely look at. I don't think that would be too tough in track. John, do you think that would be too tough for them to update? Because I think you put your place in there. It just,
Yeah.
it doesn't have 5th and 6th.
I don't know. My concern, as with anything, and it's not just what Tom's saying, is when things are brought up in the meeting, it's a little difficult to vet things, and
Yep.
sometimes don't know other
The whole field.
circumstances and stuff like that. So I would say that if this is something we would want to move forward with, obviously there is a process where we can do it now, but I would also like time to be able to vet something like this, and haven't had it.
Good point. Good point. Rusty?
I was just gonna say, our league actually was kicking around putting in a proposal for this exact thing, so we would probably just wait and do that for when it's
That
appropriate.
the one you
Yeah, from the Rocky Mountain League, yes.
Hey, Sully. Hey,
Yeah.
I wanted to address if it was a clerical error or what we need to do to look at the placement for the 8-man brackets for regionals, because it currently reads top 4 will be seeded and the rest will be randomly drawn in, where the 16-man bracket doesn't say that.
JJ, I believe that's been fixed.
Okay, perfect.
And JJ, was that in the manual, the regional manuals, that what you're talking about? Okay, the host manual. All right. Rusty, I think you had some.
Yeah, just a quick comment. From everyone I've talked to, the seating we use this year has fixed a lot of the problems from the past. And it reflects a lot of the past seatings for state. And I think everyone wanted to get back closer to that. And if we do look at like what Tom's talking about, not just the guys that were fourth that lost the wrestle back, it would have to be all of the fifth place finishers.
I agree with that point. If we're gonna make that move, then I agree it should go to include 5th and 6th place, so. So I think, again, if this were to come forward in the form of a motion next year, I think that would be a good way, and we can ask John to check with track this year, just to see, you know, how easy of a switch that would be and get us some feedback for next year. But definitely, I think that is something we could look into, especially given the new wrestlebacks included in the tournament now. Okay, moving on to state tournament review here, kind of at the bottom. Really, there was several changes this year, and overall, I think things went very, very well. Again, hats off to John and Sandy and the tournament committee for their work. Tournament together. Just appreciate everybody's work. You know, it takes a lot of people to run this tournament. And so just want to thank everybody that volunteers their time to put it on. Any comments, thoughts? Like I said, I heard lots of good comments regarding the schedule and how things went and moving kind of those 2 rounds up a day, and how that kind of played out with just placers on Saturday and all of that. So I thought those were good changes all around. Brittany?
I just wanted to echo what you said, Travis. It does take a lot to put this on. There's a lot of moving pieces. And I think with the addition of another girls division, everyone was a little nervous about how it would run. I think it was pretty flawless in the schedule and how the rounds went. I appreciated weigh-ins a lot. Weigh-ins were really nice. It was nice not to freeze in the tunnel waiting to go back in and warm up. So thank you guys for that. I also appreciated just like the fan base that got to come in because of how the sessions were run. There was a large fan base. I think one of the fullest state tournaments that we've been to, which was also really cool. And yeah, just with the addition, I think it went really well. And there's one more comment I can't remember, but yeah, thank you guys. I know that's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of working pieces. Oh, Friday night, blood round quarterfinals Friday night was a lot of fun. And I don't know if a lot of people feel that way, but I feel like our semifinalist ticket payers got their money's worth Friday night, and that was a lot of fun. So thank you guys.
I've heard a lot of those comments too. Part, especially moving the blood rounds to Friday night.
I would think the only issue that, and I know that the 2A, 3A didn't have that big of an issue, but I would think 4A, 5A with the late night Thursday and then the super early turnaround Friday. Yeah, and I talked to JJ a little bit about it. If there was any way, like I said, 2A, 3A didn't bother us that bad. I mean, we were done at, I don't even know, 4, 5, and then, you know, you have all night and then it's not that early of a weigh-in. But like I said, 4A, 5A, and even the girls, that quick turnaround, I mean, it's not fun. I spoke with JJ about possibly bringing up the idea of trying to find a way to possibly do like an offsite weigh-in. I don't know how that would work with workers, like scheduling workers to be at that offsite venue, trainers to do skin checks. If you wanted to have officials there to kind of oversee stuff, I mean, it's almost a whole nother group in itself to have that. I just think personally, giving the 4A, 5A and the girls that ample amount of time between competitions and weight. I mean, if you had a kid that was, 2 or 3 over, he's probably cutting weight till, 11, 12 o'clock, and then you're back on the scale at 6. And then mind you, you do get that long break after weigh-ins, but that quick turn.
Absolutely. I will say this, Tony, we did look, there's limits on where we can do an offsite weigh-in. There were some suggestions to look at schools, and those of you that work in schools realize and know that school's going on. So to bring in 1,000 kids or half of that, 500 kids, it's probably about 600 because nobody's eliminated yet Friday morning, right? It becomes a bit of a logistical trick. So we did look at Mesa. I thought their gym would be a perfect spot. It's walking distance. They had an event on that Thursday night, and we're not willing to make any change. I 100% can and will look to see if there's a situation where we can find a site. I do agree with everything you said. It is difficult turnaround time. I will say that there will always need to be some gives and takes with everything, no matter what. But if we can get, if we can get a mid-morning one rather than super early, that would be great. And if Mesa has the ability to do that and we have the personnel, I don't think that would be a huge issue, to be honest with you, the personnel piece. I say that now until we actually do it.
But I've been rolling that around in my
Yeah.
head, and I do think that would be, that will be tough. Because
Yeah.
it takes about 30 people to run our weigh-ins.
Yeah, I just don't know
And-
if it would look the same.
Right,
And it wouldn't be as quick, I can tell you that.
I think you also have plenty of those coaches that are gonna be involved that would be willing to help facilitate that, to allow for others to do it and do it the right way.
I agree with that. We have more neutral parties involved though, just in case. So like who we have there is intentional as well. I think there's other issues as well, just with parking and getting kids, but that's why we kind of looked at Metro, because it is walkable right across the street. When they said no, I said, well, is there another place on campus? And they said no. So we'll continue to ask, and if it's a situation where we can get it to work and it's not a pain in the butt for them, I think they may say, oh, okay, this is great, and this is something that we could definitely continue to do if the space is available. I will say one other thing, and I know this doesn't help a ton, but this is the first year with this new schedule. So, we took I don't know if these are good notes, but I took notes on when things end, and how long our sessions were on average compared to what we thought they would be. There was a larger gap in that Friday clear house to the second session. So 100%, we've already adjusted the schedule for next year. It's 30 minutes for the weigh-in. I know it's only 30 minutes, but it may be better than nothing right now if we can't find another place. So, yeah.
I would just add, I think weigh-ins, the process of getting folks down on the mat, off the mat, and back to where they need to be was really flawless. And I think it went really well and got people where they needed to be quickly. So I appreciated that a ton. And I know it's a lot of prompting teenagers to remember to have their crap ready and get down there quickly, but I did think that went really well. So.
I would agree. I think even if you did find an offsite, even if you'd ran half of the scales that you have on the floor, I think you would go fairly quickly. I mean, like Brittany said, if you have high school kids that understand what they're supposed to be doing, I think it makes it a lot easier. But I think kudos to everybody that was involved in changing the weigh-in format down to the floor. I think it's helped tremendously, big time.
That came from this committee and Jason, and Travis.
And so I think John has heard that point and is going to look into it. I would just, again, tell the committee and those listening, it is not as easy as it sounds to be able to move that offsite. The number of personnel, the timing to find a place, to communicate that to coaches, to do all those pieces, it will take some work to make that happen. So I know John will do his level best to see if that's an option for us, but I just want people to know it's not as easy as just saying we're going to move off site. It does take quite a few pieces to do that. Because even weigh-ins in ball takes a lot of organization, right, Jason? Yeah, takes a lot of organization to get it to move that smooth. All right. Anything else from the state tournament before we move on?
ask really quickly, was there any feedback on the finals round for state? Because I thought that also went really smooth. I thought it was high energy. I thought giving out awards went really well. I didn't know if there was any feedback for finals, but I just wanted to share my 2 cents. I thought it was fun. Lots of high energy, lots of good fan base. So thank you guys.
I didn't get any
Yeah.
feedback, which is normally a good thing.
I have a quick question. First of all, I would tell you, I really enjoyed the state tournament. I thought it was outstanding. It's such a huge event. And thank you to everybody who worked so hard to put it together. And I really want to emphasize that because I do think it was an excellent tournament. Couple things that as you just kind of notice as a fan experience, and this is a question I have. Were they selling alcohol at the event?
Despite the behavior of some of our adults, no, they were not.
Okay, because maybe it was just the visibility of it. I thought I saw at some of the vendors cans of beer in the refrigerators behind the vendors, and then at some of the bars they had all kinds of liquor bottles that were visible. And so I didn't know if it was being sold or if it was just there as a visual. Because what I know for sure is that it was visible to everyone. What I didn't know is if it was being sold. So that was one thing, given the fact that it's a high school event, lots of kids there, just something to think about. The other thing, just in terms of coaching some of the workers from ball, a lot of comments were made to me, and I observed a lot, some pretty aggressive behaviors around removing people from the arena in between rounds. We got to, yelling at people, we got to get clean, we got to clean, we got to clean. And then there was no cleaning going on. It was clear that it was just we want to get you out of here and bring you back in and charge you again. And I just think that's not your deal. But if they're ever open to any feedback, as I look at that whole experience for a fan and just things I've heard from some of our parents. And I want to come back to my first comment that I think from the work you all did, the tournament was excellent. It was a great event. I'm thinking more of some of the other things on the periphery that weren't basically out of your control. So anyways, just a few thoughts.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I do think ball is receptive to our feedback. I know at least the people we work with on a daily basis there appreciate hearing feedback. And so I think that's something we can share with them.
I've got some, and this might, anybody can shut this down. We went to a couple tournaments this year where, like it has been in years and years and years, you start at 106, you go to heavyweight. Has there ever been a talk about doing like an alternating weight format in the finals? Starting at 6s, second weights is heavyweights, then you go back to 13s, 215s, 120s. Well, and even just looking at it, like, you get to those heavyweight matches and even like the later girls matches, and that arena's half full. People, they dip out. And I think it wouldn't be a bad idea now that we're starting finals earlier. So you're getting out earlier and you're not there till 11, 12 o'clock. Just to kind of keep more fans involved.
I guess the question I would have, and I'd be wide open to any changes, is as a coach, does it become an issue if your kids all week, your 13s get ready when they see 106s, and does that create an issue? I got a little bit of feedback from the mat orientation. We're so used to coming out of this tunnel for the tournament, and then for one session we had to come out of this tunnel. So I guess my concern would be, would that mess up just that routine? Could an alternative be?
I would say as a coach, no, because you're coaching them to go from a certain number of bout numbers for when to warm up versus what weight class. So, we tell them 20 bouts or 15 bouts or whatever it is, depending on the round and how quick and how many mats are going, when to go out and get warmed up. So I think that's more logistical for us versus you guys having to worry about that and us coaching them.
Yeah, and that topic has come up previous years. It never did go anywhere, but that has been brought up. It's probably been several years ago now. I think, again, if a proposal wants to get brought forth and there wants to be some discussion out there in in the state, and that's the direction that coaches want to go to. I don't think that's too tough.
I
think you're seeing more
Nothing
tournaments.
changes on our end, really, so.
More tournaments drawing a number, kind of like similar to duels for finals, so that those big guys and those upper weights aren't always at the end.
They
And
kind of get that same feel and that same buzz that, you know, you do at the 13-6s, 20-pound matches earlier in the night.
I think that the coaches that I've visited with, I think they'd be definitely open to doing an alternate format like Tony described, or just drawing a weight similar to duels and publishing it ahead of time, saying we're starting at 144s this year and 135s on the girls' side, or whatever it may be. And they're used to it. And I think more tournaments are going to that. I know regionals, we talked about it. We did it at the Gunnison girls, started at 40s, 45s, I think. So I think coaches would be open to it for sure.
As someone with an amazing heavyweight, who always gets shafted on the amount of people that are still in the stands, I love this idea. I think it has been talked about a lot. So I love that it was brought up. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, we will take that feedback, and again, as you're making your rounds this next year, just why don't you talk with some people and see what they think about that idea, and if we've got a league that wants to put that forward, I think that would be great.
One more, I told him I'd bring it to the attention. His concern, coach, was when we were warming up with all the divisions there, it was crowded. I didn't know if it's possible to do a timeline for each division, 2A, 3A, 4A girls have 20 minutes and then they get off and then the other guys come on. The other divisions come on, because he was concerned of injuries as they were warming up. And it just, because it's nice to have that many kids down there. It was awesome. He was concerned about injuries, and that's the
Are you
only,
talking about for semifinals? Or-
yeah, yes, when everybody was down there.
I think to that point, though, there was also people that didn't need to be on the mat.
Right, I was
So I
gonna say
think
there should be less
limiting, I
people.
mean, there was literally children with shoes and with no socks running around the mat at one point during warm-ups, where I asked them to kindly get off the mat because they're people that are here to do some work, but they were just playing. So I think limiting how many people are out there and how many coaches are standing on a mat versus, just logistically, it was a lot.
I would love to see the number of coaches on the mat limited. Our coaching staff does not go down to the mat. And so, sitting up above, and I very intentionally watched that this year. And, some of the coaches are down there and they are working with their athletes, and they're setting, they have their very specific things that they do. But I mean, I would say at least 3/4 of the coaches that were down on the mat were just standing in groups, taking up space, talking to each other, not interacting with their athletes, you know, not contributing to the warm up of their athletes. I would love to see them not down there, or, stay off, don't be on the mat, stay on the sides, in the walking paths. Cause it does, the number of potential injuries. I mean, we've had kids in the past, get kicked in the head during, warm-ups where the mats are too crowded. So I would love to see limits put on that.
Okay, good feedback. Good feedback. I know John's, he's furiously taking notes over here I can see the wheels turning already, so. All right, we good to move on to item 9, our discussion items?
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
We had our league meeting last night. And so I just specifically asked them about, the voting for, wrestler of the year and the coach of the year, and asked them, if they remember seeing QR codes or if they heard, over the loudspeaker. And about half of them said that they didn't know where to go. They tried, they went down to the floor, and they couldn't find where to go. And then other ones said that they found the tiny table, but they were either they couldn't vote or they weren't sure if they could vote. And then also knowing who they wanted to vote for, but not knowing their names, like head coach of such and such. So they definitely expressed a desire to make that a little bit easier. I don't know if we just need balloons on the little table or what, but possibly having access to an actual list of coaches for those of us who don't know everybody or don't know everybody's names. So just looking at making that a little bit easier. I also wonder if you guys have the numbers, like how many people actually voted. I think it's something that we as members of this committee can, talk to people throughout the season, encourage more voting to go on. But that was just some of the feedback that I got from our group. So I want to put that out there.
Just to clarify, one, I mean, yes, please feel free to put that message out there. Understand that is the Coaches Association that puts that on. I know Tom was listening to those thoughts there.
As far as the Coaches Association, we've been located on that north end, and we try to, CHSAA does announce periodically where we're located and to vote, but if we need to put balloons up, we can put balloons up. And I don't have a problem. And as far as helping, we try to help out who coaches where and what names we have. The only stipulation that we have is you have to be a member to vote for a Coaches Association. And they could join and then vote right there. And then, but as far as the wrestler, now CHSAA took over that the last 2 years, and that's that QR code. We also have that on our table to help the coaches out, so they could find that QR code and do both there at the same table, is what we're trying to help out. And like I said, we've communicated with Travis and John and Sandy, trying to get as much advertising for us on that, in that north end. We'll just gotta, I guess, do better as far as maybe put a flyer in our packet, in the packet. We'll, to advertise more, but like I said, if we need to put balloons up, we can put balloons up to get us there, get the coaches there. That's not a problem.
And I'm going to jump in and again, remind you, this is a great opportunity and a reason to be a part of the Coaches Association. And again, you must be a member of the Coaches Association for your kid to be able to participate in the all-state games as well. So just a couple of reminders there for those.
The athlete, the wrestler vote is not limited. We did put QR codes in every packet and then put them in the VOMs as well. This year we had over 100 people vote, which I think is much bigger than last year as well. So.
All right, I'm going to keep moving us along because I do know that one of our issues here will probably take some lengthy discussion. So the first thing on our kind of to-do list here and the discussion items is that weight permit form. If you're looking online, you can pull up the link. I don't know if is it printed off in the packet?
Yes.
It is? Okay. And so I think really kind of what we should do as a committee is put forth, if we feel it's appropriate, a recommendation for this bylaw change. Obviously, it will need to come forward on its own as legislative council, and it will be on the agenda, supported by the board of directors. But I think it's good as us as a committee if we can say, yes, we recommend supporting this bylaw change. It's a little different than our committee report. It will not be officially, the bylaw change is not a part of our committee report. So if the committee report passes, this has to pass on its own merits and its own vote. Does that make sense? Okay. But what we can do is we can put forward a recommendation to support this bylaw change.
So basically, this bylaw would change the language a little bit of the weight permit form to, I think, more closely align with the use of track wrestling. So right now, we would strike a portion of the bylaw that says the certified minimum weight form must be signed by the parents or legal guardian and the examining physician when an athlete fails to meet the minimum body fat. Okay, the higher of the two weights will be the minimum weight if the parent and the physician do not agree. Okay, so we would just strike that portion and use what the OPC essentially says for kids. So they still need to get a physician's signature. That is part of the OPC for them to wrestle at the weight that they weigh in at. Again, reminder, and I don't know how many times I can say this and put it in the bulletin. Physician cannot recommend a kid go to a lower weight class. That's not what this is saying. This is just saying that they can participate. So.
Can you repeat the part about the parent signature?
Sure. The certified minimum weight form must be signed by the parents or legal guardian.
So we would be striking that from the current bylaw and going with the weight that the physician certifies the athlete at in OPC.
So the parent permission, they still need to sign for the kid to participate. That has not changed. That's.
What's the motivation of not having the parents sign for the weight?
The documentation is within track wrestling. So it just goes right into track wrestling with it.
It's kind of it's redundant at this point.
It's redundant, yeah.
And if I
So
understand-
the parent does have to approve it ultimately.
Sure,
If I understand correctly too, the form you take to the physician is printed from the OPC.
yes.
It has to be signed and evaluated by the parent and the physician. So they're still signing an acceptance of what's. Which
Okay.
I wanted to check with everybody and see, I know last year we had a heck of a time getting physicians to sign off on forms and we essentially had to find chiropractors or other athletic facilities do that. I don't know if there's any feedback this year from coaches or others if you had difficulty getting weight sheets signed again. We didn't. We found a pretty good system, but I know that was an issue last year. So I just wanted to check in.
I did. I even had to call John on it to see if our school nurse, who handles all of the logistical things as far as medical information, physical forms, all of that, and I got the clearance from.
Right, so there's a portion in the bylaws that talks about exactly who can do a physical and who can sign off on that stuff, so yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All right. Does the committee feel like they would like to make a motion to recommend that this bylaw change be put in place, or are we just good reviewing it and letting it go to legislative council?
I think we need to make a motion on it. And if we're in favor and move it forward as presented, so I make that motion.
Second that motion.
So at this point, I don't know that this will be a tumultuous vote. So we'll just kind of do a hand vote, and if we'll just raise our hands since we've got some online and some here. All those in favor in recommending this bylaw to the legislative council, just give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. Okay. All right. That's everybody, Sandy.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to B. John has been working very diligently this last year on the concept of a dual team state tournament. There's information in your packet that he has gathered and put together and worked with the subcommittee on in terms of putting together what would be an 8-team dual team state tournament. It would take place, right now the recommendation is 2 weeks before the state tournament or a week before regionals. Hopefully you've had time to review that in your packet. And so we just wanted to put that up for discussion and see what people are thinking about that information and go from there.
The one thing that coaches have brought up to me is the timeline being a week before regionals. The West Slope coaches 2 weeks before regionals, because kind of wrestle that last tough go. Then that week before, I know a lot of schools take that week off before regionals, maybe one dual, then regionals, then state. Was the handful of coaches that I discussed it with, is they'd like to see it 2 weeks before regionals. So dual team state championships, a bye week or week off if you want to do a last sharpening the saw, then regionals, then state. That timeline worked. But that was the one feedback that I got was going dual team state championships, regionals, and then state was kind of 3 weeks in a row that they'd like to see, kind of that buffer between the dual state championship, regionals, and state.
And I might be wrong, but I think that if you did it that way, I think it would maybe impede on a bunch of league tournaments. Yeah.
I guess a concern I would have with that as well as part of the dual state qualifying, you need to get in X amount of duels. So that would, you're essentially taking away an extra week in that case as well.
Yep.
I guess, yeah, my initial thought is what does the committee think about a dual state tournament in the first place? And then, we had a subcommittee that kind of went through a lot of this and did a lot of the legwork and kind of came up with this, had some conversations about timing and things like that. But I guess the initial thought is this something that the committee thinks is good for the sport? It's good to move with.
I
And
think
then-
my only concern would be for those smaller teams, like on the girls' side, where they don't have full squads. Not being able to participate in that just because they are a smaller school and don't have the same participation as some of the larger schools. So we're counting out some of the great wrestlers that could participate in that, so that would be my only concern.
Can you remind me, I apologize, how do you get selected to participate in those 8 teams?
Sure. You would need a minimum number of duels to participate. And 1 second here, Don,
You said there's 8
There's
teams
a-
involved?
format and qualifying procedures. It would be 8 teams. So you have to have a minimum number of weights filled, and also a minimum number of duels that you've participated in. So those would be, I guess, non-starters for schools. Ryan Casey he and I have worked together to create, and I can share this out a little bit later, what an RPI system or a scoring system would be that is similar to what is used for our other sports. There is no max preps right now for wrestling. Well, there kind of is, but nobody uses it. He's spoken to max preps and they'd be willing to take that on. Part of what our subcommittee talked about as well is leaning also towards a second metric that may deal along the lines of returning state points. Understand that's more of an individual thing, but just another way to, I guess, make sure we get the top teams in there. So essentially, we would be taking the top 10 ranked teams. Okay, only 8 qualify. We do the top 10. And no different than we would do for our regional. We're going to go head to head starting at the bottom. So if 10 beat 9, they're going to flip spots. And if 9 beat 8, they're going to flip spots and could eventually become a qualifier. If there's a gap in between, just like individuals, there wouldn't be movement there. But so we would pull the 10 for our committee and then look at those 10 to get 8.
Okay, thanks.
I think one thing that might hinder it too is, and I talked with Roosevelt head coach Brendan Montoya about this. I believe it's them. I think they're strictly league duels during the year, and they only get maybe 2 other weeks to where they can kind of go out and pick. Patriot League, we have the ability, and we kind of agreed with not having league duels. If there is a team in your league that you do want to duel, go ahead and schedule that, but you're not restricted to just league duels. So I think that might hinder a team like a Roosevelt or whoever else in a certain league that is restricted to just league duels throughout the year. So their RPI might not be as big as like a Pomona or, I mean, even us. I know I try to reach out and schedule a bunch of different teams outside of the league just to kind of get away from that redundancy of the same teams over and over.
Have that issue with more so in the 2A, 3A, but geography then comes into play. We're probably not going to be able to go and duel Alamosa. So finding some of those duels and, especially for 2A, 3A, if you're trying to even meet in the middle, that could be quite a bit if you're trying to set yourself up for this. The thought about leagues setting up their duels, that happens a lot around the state. And, that's That's why I probably, if we're thinking we still want to move in this direction, I would caution us to put this in place next year because a lot of places.
Look, next school year or the next cycle?
So for this next school year to bring it in, I would caution us because a lot of places already have their dual schedules lined out for next year. That's already scheduled based on what you did this year. There's some flip-flopping that takes place and those kinds of things. So, I think that would hinder schools quite a bit if we put this in mid-cycle. And so I think we should probably.
Yeah, so if there's something we would want to go with, you would recommend start of the next cycle.
Mhm.
Leagues could plan accordingly if you wanted to readjust how you would do your dual schedule or your league tournament dual, if you do something along those lines.
Yeah, I think still kind of going back to John's first question, is this still an idea that the committee thinks we should move forward with? I know it was several years ago, but just kind of still seeing if, we've got some new faces here and things, so. Go ahead, Rusty.
Yeah, this is something that has been tried in the past and our teams have been involved in this. And without CHSAA support, or it was just a trial for CHSAA to look at, it kind of faded away between changes of coaches and stuff like that. But I think it's a really good thing. My personal opinion is I think what is written up and proposed, there's issues with this. You're gonna get feedback. Not everybody's gonna be happy with the number of duels, with the, league duels, non-league duels. I think this is a really good format to start, as long as there's tweaks to be made as we go along. And I think we need to get it going. And there are gonna be issues. And as long as we're open to changing the issues as we hit them, this is as good as any proposal I've seen on it, and I think it'll work. I don't like all of it, but neither does anyone else, and we'll see how it works.
I just have two kind of questions, comments. Would matches wrestled at the dual state tournament also count towards record or seeding for postseason regional state? Like it would count as your whole full record?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing it wouldn't count for would be the number of duels that you are allowed.
Perfect. So it wouldn't like knock down your,
Correct.
okay. My only concern with that is teams who can't participate because of size they could still go and do a different tournament that weekend or
Absolutely.
compete. And then my second one, location wise, are you guys thinking like a school within that classification to offer? Any ideas around
Great
that?
question right now.
Cool.
I think some of the big, sticking points for me and just logistically what this would look like is who's willing to host. Right now, we sometimes struggle with getting regional hosts. So are we going to be able to get some hosts for this? How big would this look? Is this something that you would need a Montrose Event Center, or is this something that you need a high school to start and then grow from there? I don't know. I think the initial thought, Brittany, would be that we would work with high schools to see if we can get large enough spaces and large enough mats to get in there. If there are no two-way high schools that can fit in X amount of mats, then no, we couldn't host it at a two-way high school. But I think, one of the things we do with some of our other sports that have multiple championships at multiple sites is we do have the ability to move it around the state and allow different parts of the state to be a host and things like that, which I think is neat.
There might be a benefit to a little more conversation about whether or not that these dual meets should count for the seeding of the state tournament individuals. And I just think about a state tournament for dual meets as a culminating event that you have to qualify for and get into, and then as a team. And then that can turn around and affect the seeding for individuals at the state tournament. So I don't know. It just might be worth some conversation around that. I do think you're going to run into quite a few conflicts with who is selected to qualify. I just know from the way it works with other sports now. I was surprised at which some of our teams qualified for the state football tournament with terrible records just because of the, who they played and the scoring system. So I just think it's going to get a lot more complicated. And if you could separate the regular state tournament from this and not have a nexus there and seeding, it may be worth some more conversation.
Other thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's, like Rusty said, I mean, I read this on the way back from the state tournament, and I think the base is there. I think obviously there's gonna be logistics of a bunch of different things. I think agreeing with you guys about not necessarily next year, but that next cycle, that way you give leagues the opportunity to quote unquote opt in or opt out, whether they let schools go outside of the district or their league for duels to try to qualify for this. But I mean, I think it makes the sport within the state a little bit more exciting. There's more to look forward to, as far as the kids goes. I don't know. I'm on the fence about if those matches there would count towards like seeding for state criteria stuff. I think that's kind of a
It would only be regionals though, right? Because the.
sure. Yeah. So I mean,
Less head to head.
yeah, right.
Especially for folks who can't participate, it would be a little bit of a disadvantage.
Right, I agree. But I think the basics and the base of it, I think, is there. There obviously, like what Rusty said, I think there's obviously going to be kinks and things that need to be worked out, and nothing's going to be spot on perfect the first time you do it. So just being open to making adjustments and trying to accommodate as many people as you can. You're not going to obviously please everybody every time, but
I do, just thinking about some of these things. I do worry about what it does in terms of scheduling and creating a greater divide between the haves and the have-nots. Those schools that are able to fill their rosters and are potentially pursuing this, and the schools that do not have a full roster. Already those schools that don't have a full roster have trouble scheduling duels. I would hope that this creates some excitement and brings back even more of the team atmosphere in wrestling. I do just worry a little bit about, schools telling other schools, no, we're not gonna wrestle you because you only have 7 kids and I don't need to use one of my duels on you. So I do have that concern.
I think another thing it could help is, let's say if you do get a team. I mean, I'll use my team this year, for instance. I mean, at one point in time, we only had 16 guys on the roster. That was varsity and JV. We ended up having, after I think it was like the second week, we had a handful of kids come back or come out, more kids. But I think it could help in getting more kids out in general. I think more involvement within the schools, stuff like that. So.
Agree with that. I'm on both ends. My boys' team is full enough that I could qualify for this. My girls' team is not. Okay, and I think the onus is on me to build the numbers in my girls' team to get my girls to make this happen. So it puts a little more pressure on the coaches, because I do believe I have a girls' team that could compete there if I had a full roster.
Just one more on RPI, like geography wise, right? I know there's been a little bit of discomfort with like co-op teams in geography and not getting to access teams as easily. So looking at RPI and the constraints geography puts on that might be something to take into consideration too. Like, who are you getting to wrestle because of location, and who are you not getting to wrestle because of location, including district transportation, which I know is a nightmare for some schools, and some teams are now paying to have transportation to other places. So just some other things to kind of toss out there too.
Yeah, and I think that point goes to kind of what Rusty's hinting at, as, there are probably some things that we're gonna have to adjust as we go along. We definitely see the issues in football with only having 9 or 10 data points in there. in determining what playoff qualifiers and maybe the accuracy of that. But in the same respect, it's kind of, I think, the best option we have right now until we kind of, go through it a few times and see where we can make those tweaks.
I don't know if you guys did, I'm sure you probably did, but looking at other states and seeing, kind of what their format and everything is and how they go through the qualification process and kind of everything like that too. I think that would help.
The two main ones were a point system, whatever that point system looks like, versus a qualifying event. So those were the two options. If we do a qualifying event, that's another week that takes away. So we kind of leaned more towards this. Obviously, we could morph into whatever makes sense as this goes. If this takes off, there maybe we do it, if there is a regional for this, a regional format for this, whatever. It was about 60-40 in terms of the way people did qualifying with a point type system. Nobody did a true RPI, but it was really similar to that.
Can I ask, cost benefit on this? I mean, there would be a cost on the end for us financially, for example, like 60, being able to afford to send a team up there or two or whatever that looks like. But I think my concern, and I'm not opposed to any of it. It's on. Is the intensity of that meet a week before regionals, and then what's the goal? Do you want to be an individual state champion? And that's been around for as long as it has been. So, I mean, there is a cost benefit. I mean, do you want to look for the team's dual title, or is you really striving for the individual state title and the team title 2 weeks later? So I worry about injuries, for some kids that are right there. But, again, we're talking about a small percentage. If you have 8 teams dual, we're not talking 63 schools going through all this. So, but still, there will be a time where that could come into play. And is the juice worth the squeeze?
No doubt that somebody could get hurt in a regular tournament or a regular duel as well. It's just so hard to predict, but you're 100% right.
Hey, Sully. Being part of that when Nebraska started theirs, like the first couple of years, I'll be honest, there was that mindset. There were a number of teams that opted out. They thought it was too close to regionals or in district for Nebraska and stuff like that. And then as it continued to grow, like I'm telling you that no teams opt out if they get invited. I guess the other thing I just wanted to kind of note is like let's not overthink this too much. I mean, the head-to-heads that you're going to have at this are only going to make your regional tournament and state tournament more accurate with these tough matchups. Totally adds a different dynamic. And I think when we come to scheduling, I mean, I think I'll just say, we're a 5A school with low participation. This doesn't change me finding duels any different than it would for me for basketball or this and that. It is a lot easier for the better teams to find those matchups. It doesn't matter what sport it is, and it's more difficult if you're a struggling team. So I don't think we need to overthink this. I think it's great for kids. I think it's great for the sport, and it's definitely something, at least for the 26-28 cycle, we've got to get in place.
Anything else?
I have a thought just on the scheduling piece. Depending on which weekend it ends up happening, we have a lot of, long-standing tournaments. I know for the girls, like it has the potential to land on Chatfield weekend if we decide to go 2 weeks before regionals. So are we looking at those kinds of things too of like, okay, it's one of the best tournaments of the year and Chatfield's always one of the highest ranked teams. So they're probably going to get invited every year. So what kind of like ripple effect does that have? If the teams that, hold their tournament every year, are they just always opting out or, so I just kind of like that logistical piece.
Desiree, it will have an effect and schools will have to adjust. And that's just as simple as that. If we want this in and we want to do it, and we want to do it right, we'll do it how we need to do it. And schools will have to adjust. And that's just how it is.
I would also add that the subcommittee, we spent a lot of time talking about when. And so it was looked at and we looked at 2 weeks, we looked at during the state tournament, we looked at we looked at everything. And what we landed on was the week before regionals would have the least impact based on what you are saying in terms of the tournament. But again, we also all understood that it would have an impact for sure.
I'd just like to add, it's my last year on the committee, but I think any chance we get to grow the sport, I think we should take a stab at it and try it. So like Rusty said, just give it a shot, see how it goes, find the holes and fix them as we can. So.
What have you guys spoke about this before, is having it after the state tournament, after a regular state tournament, and just having the dual tournament that week right after?
Talked about that as well, and there were concerns about another week of kids cutting weight. And that's why, again, we fell on that week that we did.
Well, and now you're also bringing in kids that haven't participated for a week to maintain, weight after the state tournament if they're part of that team but didn't make the state tournament. You're also infringing on spring sports another week. And so, those concerns are out there as well.
But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we're going to jump ahead a little bit because I know we have Jim on for a proposal.
Is this, can I
Go ahead.
tell the board of directors that the dual team is something we want to move forward with? Do we need to vote on that?
We can, if that would help you.
It would help me, yeah.
Okay, all right. So do we have an interest in the committee then to put a motion forward on a potential implementation timeline for the dual team state tournament?
I'll motion.
All right. So clarify, I believe the motion would be to continue to work on this with implementation of to start the 26-28 cycle.
Thank you.
Is that really what you're motioning to?
Yeah, motion.
Okay.
Go wait to the next cycle.
Any further discussion? Sandy, are you caught up? Yeah. Okay. All right. Again, I don't know that this will be tumultuous, so I think we'll just do a raise of hands. Those in favor, go ahead and raise your hand. Looks like we have really everybody that's in attendance has voted in favor of that. Okay, that'll help John with his planning and can work with the board of directors. And I'm sure he will put this out probably this year to people to get more feedback and see how we can continue to grow that and work with the subcommittee. And so I would anticipate next year at this time would be bringing forward the more finalized plan for us to vote on and to put in the official committee report for the 26-28 cycle. Okay. All right. Sorry, I missed that part. Moving on, we're going to jump down to letter D, the 3A regional building, the proposal the Frontier League put together. We've got Jim Rodel on with us. And so we're going to look at this piece real quick, and then we'll go back up and talk about the regionals for our girls' classifications. We'll do this one real quick, and then we'll take a break. Does that sound good? Yep. Okay. All right. So in your packet, you have, let me find it here. You had the proposal from the Frontier League. That is in kind of the red and the black lettering. And so at the top, it's CHSAA amendment to the committee reports. And really, this proposal is looking to add 4 more teams into the snake of Class 3A. So currently 12 teams are snaked out in 3A, and this proposal would move it to 16 teams. And the rationale that is included in here is to look at potentially better balancing the regionals. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to see if he's got additional comments, things that he wants to make, and then open up to discussion within the committee.
I appreciate it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. First of all, thank you, Travis. Thank you, Wrestling Committee, for giving us an opportunity to kind of present at least a proposal to you guys. I think it's really more around discussion, but I think this would be one potential outcome to, like Travis already said, to balance each of our regionals' total number of participants. And so as you look at Class 3A, I provided you at least the last 3 years of data to kind of suggest what's been happening along the region that we've been assigned to or not even assigned to for our sport, but everywhere across the board. You'll see that that gap is growing in sense of almost 37 more participants in some regions than others. And so one easy metric for us to look at was just the number of bouts that are being done. And so that was one way for us that kind of come to fruition, is saying we're spending more time in one region than another region as well, but then also the number of participants and then the equitableness of that opportunity for kids. Obviously, we understand the strength in doing the snake format, and we think that if you extended that, either there's 16 teams, or even if gone as so far as what 5A is doing and snaked all the teams, we believe that balance would be more representative across each region. I think it would help with the overall timing of when regions complete and finish, because there are some things that I think are going on inside regions that would help to address as well. And so one of the other considerations, just so it's on the table for discussion, maybe not this time, but for the future, is also, is there an opportunity to potentially look at the weight certifications after the season has started, when the regions have been assigned, and actually see the number of actual participants that we're expecting from each team that are assigned in those regions, because that might help you to balance it. I just know the lateness of that may have some issues with travel. And so that's not on the proposal. It's just something that we talked about also as a consideration, and felt like at least going to the 16 team snake format would benefit it to start, and then we could look at the others. I just want to highlight real quick, and then for discussion, answer any questions, how we came up with it, but also the pros, obviously, the equity in each region to balance that off. We also think it has the potential seating for state. It increases that opportunity for the fairness of each one of our athletes, because you do currently have some gaps where you have regions that have 7 athletes where you're competing against 13, and that just doesn't seem equitable or equal. And then it also aligns us with the 4A and 5A, so it's not something that we're coming from left field on. It's not unique to us. And then I think the major impact, and we've talked a little bit about with some of the teams, I don't know that I've spoken to all of them. I know Tommy is there, our coach, also the CHSAA president. He's in support of this as well. And I would just mention, I think the biggest negative is going to be on the 3A side of things. We're more diverse geographically speaking. And so when you snake out further, obviously, then you're assigning ahead of time where those may be going to those regions. So travel may be increased on a cost basis. However, in my conversations getting back into this, it's been a while for me, but getting back into this and talking to a lot of the coaches, a lot of those 3A teams are traveling to tournaments anyway, and they would much rather be in a more equitable region and be willing to travel for more opportunities for their kids to qualify for state. So that's the proposal that's in front of you. And again, if you have any questions, there's also, I think, some discussion I would love for the committee to continue to have around just the organization and start times of regionals. And I think this might also then help with that as well, just because we might start and finish closer to the same time if they're more balanced.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. With this, I'll turn it over to the committee for questions, discussion, thoughts that you have.
This has been on the table, I think, for a few years for the 3A classification because of the number of participants. And I know this year there was 2 regions that had about 60 more participants than 2 of the other regions. I know it's been discussed among the coaches. I do think it's something that needs to be addressed. The 2 ideas I've heard is this one, or also doing like the bottom 8 teams, equalizing them. And when I say bottom 8, I'm not saying score-wise, participant-wise. So if you take the 8 teams with the lowest numbers and split them among the regions, because it looks like some of the regions are getting 3 or 4 teams that only have 3 or 4 guys. And if we equalize that, so maybe equalizing the top teams would help do that, but I also think maybe those are the two things I've heard, is this proposal here and also a proposal of equalizing the lower numbered teams on the bottom end.
Is everyone familiar with really the original reason why we snaked just 12 versus 16? And just to minimize travel for teams in 3A, because those regionals are quite spread out amongst the state. And so originally when the snake was moved into 3A and to 2A, the thought was to not snake as many, to limit travel effects to schools. I can tell you that over the years, definitely have heard feedback from schools that have to travel quite a ways for regionals. They do not like that. And they would just, that is a big cost that they have to incur. So that is why it was originally at 12. But doesn't mean we have to stay there.
There's no difference, or the traveling, as coaches that I talked to, they want to try to balance it, like Rusty said, just trying to balance the numbers. They're all willing to travel, talk to our ADs. They're willing to travel, even if we have to pay for ourselves to go, to get the better opportunity for each kid to balance those brackets. And it's really no different from, I'm going to use Fort Lupton, when they go to Middle Park in the middle of the week. There's travel expenses. They're going to Basalt. They're going to Leadville. And I'm sure other schools are doing the same travel in basketball. So it's really, and it's one time, one weekend that we're asking for regionals to balance and travel.
I think the argument to that though is those other travels are chosen. And this is mandated. And so there's a difference there when we're telling teams you have to travel 6 hours to get to your regionals versus you're making the choice to go and do a Middle Park in the middle of the week.
I know Jim took a survey of our league and they were all in favor of balancing. And I know you could ask Jim more. He talked to like Lamar and them also, as far as that.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Travis. I think what Tommy's alluding to is in other sports, not necessarily in wrestling, but for example, our alignment, and if you want to use our school as the example, and we're probably an anomaly, so I don't know if it's the best one, but we're in the Frontier League, which does travel, in our other sports too, Middle Park, all those different things. That's a choice still to some extent, right? Each couple of years, you get an opportunity to reset that if that's not a good fit for you from your classification and or your league assignment. But there are those number of trips that are happening. I guess overwhelmingly the folks we spoke with was around equity and fairness. And they felt like the equity and fairness outweighs the cost on a per student athlete basis. I guess, you have to balance that always, as through an athletic director, I get that 100%. And I know that also, district ADs as well as your superintendents, we manage budgets slightly right now. So I think that is a con. We proposed it with the idea of thinking that there are more pros that outweigh that con. Currently giving the situation that we're in now, that we have data looking at those regional assignments and the disparity between them for equity and fairness. So again, I definitely hear the side of costs because I have to manage that on a daily basis as well as the AD. So that would be the barrier.
Did you guys happen to pull 4A data too to look and see if snaking 16 teams there prevents this from happening as well?
So that was one of the things I think, Travis, I was hopeful to be able to do after the post-state tournament, was to actually look at 4A, 5A and all of them. And I was just trying to look through your information that you just provided for this year's regional points placements and things like that. So the answer to your question is no, I don't have that data readily available, but I'd be more than happy to gather it, look at it to see if it does have a significant impact on the overall equity of that regional format for each of those other classifications. We looked solely at 3A right now.
And just to pull back the curtain a little bit more, if we go to an additional 4, again, I really don't have a dog in the fight one way or another. Understand, again, the system we use to place people is off of returning points. When you go to the next 4, you're talking about now you're under 17 points here as we're looking at 3A. That's 2 kids. That's 2 kids that are causing you to have those points potentially. Or maybe it's 4 that have all taken a 6th place or something. So you are using a small fraction of that team to determine your placement in the region. So just understand, maybe it balances things. I don't know, but you are using a metric that is different than the data that's presented here.
If we did one extra row, I have the data in front of me, there would be a 1.5 point difference between that fourth row, one end to the other. I don't know how much that really moves the wheel, to be honest with you.
As far as the competition piece of it goes, and I know that this is kind of just balancing everything, but we had to travel to Pueblo this year. And it was kind of a breath of fresh air to get away from that same redundancy of the Fort Luptons, the Valleys, the Fort Morgans. I mean, the teams that we see week in and week out. That way we were able to kind of go down and see Alamosa, and we saw Classical Academy, a lot of teams that we usually get to see maybe once a year at a tournament. And with it being shorter this year, we didn't get to see them at all, except for at regionals. So as far as traveling for regionals for the competition side of things, I personally appreciated it. Kind of got our kids out of their comfort zone. And I understand that there is travel implications and hotels and all that sort of stuff that kind of goes into it. But as far as the competition part of it, I appreciated traveling.
I think one concern I would have, just from the back end and setting this up, let's get away from the returning points idea, because we're almost trying to mesh two models into one, right? And I think that makes it really difficult, because one will, I don't want to say cancel the other one out, but there'll be instances where they just don't coincide. If you did purely based on the number of participants, which is what I'm hearing as the argument, when does that get done? It's easy to say it can be done when weight certifications occur, but is that a true reflection of how many kids are going to participate in regionals? So I think that would be very difficult on my end. And I found that out this year when I was trying to pull some data at the beginning of the year. I was just like, I don't even know what to do with these numbers, because I don't think they are a true reflection. So while I do agree that it is important to balance some things out, I think the timing of it is also important. Schools need to know where they're going to go for transportation purposes and just planning purposes. So when does this occur? I don't think it's something that could occur when the school year starts, because you don't know. Weight certifications, again, you don't know. I mean, do you know your varsity roster? You might, but you might not as well. So I think it just becomes a little bit difficult to set up those regionals then. So
I also think some schools they try to build their schedule a little bit around the regionals and try to go and see teams in that region. So if we're not putting those out until during the season, that is going to have a domino effect on scheduling for schools as well.
Yeah, and Travis, we're not proposing that you have to make that adjustment. That was our 1A.
Right.
What we're really looking for is, I guess, one of the things just for me, for those that don't know me, I was in this business for a while before, and I've come back to it. So can someone remind me or refresh my memory as to why 5A and 4A went to the extended? I mean, 5A is all the way, right? They snake it all the way out. And I know geographically speaking, it's probably not as big of an issue for them. But what were some of the pros and cons at that time for those particular ones? Because again, we're not asking for something different necessarily. We're asking for something that's already been done. And so,
Again, I think it just goes back primarily to geography, Jim.
okay.
The 5A schools live up and down the I-25 corridor for the most part. You've got a couple of outliers, and that's about it. 4A is similar. And so that's why they felt 16 was fine. Again, we're talking about potentially having 4 more teams potentially travel. Again, the way the numbers shake out, maybe they don't. But again, I think it's just trying to be respectful of finances in geography and travel, and getting parents to be able to go and see their kids and, those kinds of things, by trying to keep people closer to home if you can. I really don't know that it's going to make a huge difference in the numbers, to be honest. We would have to wait and see.
if we did it this year, the only change would be we would really only have one school that would be traveling, so it wouldn't be a huge deal right now with the adding that extra line. But again, I don't know. 12, 16, whatever we use, that one line this year is only, again, 1.5 points.
Yeah, Rusty.
I agree with John. We're kind of working two different metrics, numbers and quality of teams. And I do believe quality of teams should supersede numbers. I wouldn't mind being in a region with more numbers as long as my guys that should qualify will qualify in any region. And I think that's what we're trying to get to is as long as my good guys can qualify in any region. And balancing the top end does that. As far as travel, I gotta travel no matter what.
I know you do.
Bennett has to travel, Pagosa, Gunnison, Moffett County, all these, most of the teams in 3A have to travel anyway. It doesn't matter if you put my region in, Pueblo's actually the closest, but I had the discussion a couple years ago with my AD. We went over to the Western Slope. I would have been closer going to Brush. And people don't realize that just because the amount of the mountains you have to go around and all that. So there's other issues besides as the crow flies miles to go. So we're looking for Alamos unless we host. And if we do, it'd be a burden on everyone else. So we typically won't do that only because of that. It's a huge burden if they have to come to our place on a ton of teams. So we know we have to travel. Bennett knows they have to travel. I mean, these teams know they have Gunnison, Pagosa, Bayfield. They're gonna have to travel and they accept that and I think they would just like the regions to be equalized as well as we can. And maybe going to the 16 top teams would help get that. And also when you do the equalization before the season starts, that's typically not the way it lines up through the year. And including those top 16 teams may help adjust that.
Glad you spoke to the travel issues because not everybody understands what it's like to be in that position, for sure. Any other further discussion? I think we've kind of really hit the main points on that. And so, at this point, I would put it out to the committee if they're, if anybody wants to make a motion on that proposal, that we can go ahead and do so, or we can continue to think about it.
I move that this proposal be moved on for legislative consideration.
Okay. We have a second? Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded to move 3A teams to a 16-team snake versus the current 12-team snake. Any other discussion? JJ, is your mic on? I haven't heard anything from you in a while. I'm getting a little worried.
Now I'm just looking, I mean, I just went and ran all their numbers for like, if there was a discrepancy of one region tougher than the other. I guess that's the piece I'm looking at, because I was part of that discussion years ago when we made the 4A change to 16, because we had one region that was like considerably tougher than the others. I guess that's the piece I'm looking at. I don't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, see it right now, but I mean, if you guys feel it's probably what's best to help make that make the regionals more accurate, I mean, so that's where I'm at.
JJ, that was a joke, but thank you for adding that in.
I was focused, man.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. Those in favor, go ahead and raise your hand if you're in favor of moving to the 16-team snake or 3A. Looks like that was unanimous too, to move 3A to 16 teams. And that's it.
I can adjust that.
Yeah. John will get that reflected in our packet for when we do that here in a little bit. Jim, thanks for jumping on. You're welcome to stay, or Tom can fill you in later.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the process and what you guys do. I know it's time consuming, and so I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thanks, Jim. All right, I know I kind of promised a break, but we are gonna, since Mr. Kruger's here, Commissioner Kruger, we're gonna let him touch base with our group, and then we'll take a quick break.
If I stand between you and a break, I know that what my timeline looks like. So,
That was done
JJ,
intentionally.
I also get nervous when Travis calls on me, so it's all good, man. I feel obligated to say something. I just wanted to peek in this morning and say thank you for your work on this committee. Obviously, just coming off the heels of a very successful state tournament. It was well done. I learned a couple of new things. All brakes, no gas is one I use all the time now, thanks to Curtis. I was able to get up, and I want to thank Coach Kendall for hosting regionals. Great to come and watch that, and at Pooter just did a great job. So, but just a really successful season all in all, and I think that's a compliment to the work that this committee does. I know you're in great hands with Sully and Sandra. They do a phenomenal job, and watching Travis run around at the state tournament, doing all the stuff that he does as the chair of this committee. Just very, very grateful. I like to say when we're in these meetings, our entire organization is membership driven, and one of the primary legs of our organization is the committee structure that we have to provide membership voice into the process. So please don't underestimate the influence and the importance of the work you do today. It sets the tenor and the direction for wrestling, which continues to be one of our fastest growing activities, and we're super, super excited about that. So I will be honest with you, we weren't sure how that extra mat would look in the ball arena coming in, but I got more compliments on the aesthetics and the setup. And I think that's just a compliment to the great work that you're all doing. The fact that our sport continues to grow like that. So just wanted to make sure I had a chance to pop in. Monday mornings are always like a box of chocolates, and sorry for getting here a little late, but I definitely wanted to spend some time and just let you know we're incredibly grateful for the work that you do and the time that you spend here this morning, but then throughout the year also with your program. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kruger. All right, with that, we will take a short break here. Let's see if we can be back to our seats by about 10 till, and then we'll keep going. All right, welcome back, everybody. We will get into our next discussion item. This is letter C. We're going to review the regional sizes and kind of the processes for our girls' classifications. This was the first year we had two classifications of girls wrestling, our 5A and 4A. And the recommendation from the committee last year was to run 4 regions in each of these classifications. And so as part of our, our process with this sport growing, we want to go back and review and make sure how that's working and if we need to make changes or not. And so John has included our regional breakdown numbers here so you can see how many participants were in each region. We did have a couple of regions where we were where we did not have at least 4 participants at that weight class, but we were able across the board to fill every bracket. So we had enough participants through everything that we were able to fill it all. Is that correct, John?
No.
Oh,
Heavyweight,
Oh,
4A at
4A.
state, we did not.
okay, yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, we were short a couple of participants at the state because it looks like we only had 12 total.
And then some dropped.
Okay.
Or ended up not wrestling in regionals.
Okay. Overall, numbers from last year are up from about 670 in the state to 820 girls wrestlers. So we did see an increase there.
That's varsity, what I would consider varsity that participated at a regional.
Okay. So really wanted to bring this back and see, do we need to make some adjustments? Do we not? Are we okay with where we're at and can, continuing to let things grow? Or do we think we need to make some changes? We have been in a 3 regional model previously. We did that several years ago, when, I don't know if it was the first year, if we were still in the pilot program.
2020.
Okay.
2020.
So we do have, info there that we could fall back on if we want to do something different. So that is an option out there. We could do some other things too. Just really kind of want to throw it out to coaches and members of the committee just to see what we think about how girls regionals shook out and if we think we need to go and make any adjustments. So at that, I'll put it out to the committee.
And can I interrupt here? Desiree, would you mind, since you hosted hosted a regional, just talk on your end, kind of what you saw and your overall thoughts as well?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Hosting such a small regional, especially over 2 days, was kind of awkward. We had some challenges on the officiating side, wanting things to hurry up and move faster. And then, going between making sure our girls had enough time, hitting that 30-minute, we ended up switching back and forth from 1 mat to 2 mats. We had to take breaks. The numbers provided in the sheet that we have, our numbers actually end up being a little bit smaller. I know we only had 4 at 100. And so we had at least 2 weight classes where if you made weight, you got to state, which isn't awesome. It's great. 2 of my athletes made it to state simply because they made weight at regionals. But, that really isn't the way that the state tournament should happen. Everybody should have to earn their way there. And then we actually had a couple of girls not make weight. So the numbers got even smaller. I am all for moving to 3 regions, at least for 1 or 2 years, until the growth meets where we need to go back to 4.
Other thoughts?
I think my concern in going backwards is we're seeing the growth at the middle school, and if we go backwards, we're gonna just flip flop the next year. Where And so I don't see the benefit of going back and forth. We might have these growing pains for, this last season and the next season, but I think going forward, it's gonna be beneficial all the way around.
I want to echo on that as well. I was at the Gunnison 4A Western Girls Regional. Some of the same things. We had a couple weights where you make weight and you qualify for state. That is also not unprecedented. And on the 2A boys side, we've had, at 215s or 220s, depending on what year you look at, where we only had 4 competitors. You make weight both days and you qualify. So that's a problem that's happened in the 2A level. Just real briefly, side discussions with other coaches is the growth of the girls sport is awesome. Western Slope, we just had our middle school tournament. In 2023, there was only 3 brackets at Gunnison for the girls. This year there was 11. All of those brackets were 8-man brackets. 2 of them were 16-man bracket and only 1 round robin. I know talking to primarily 4A girls coaches, they're in favor of keeping it 4 because we are seeing the growth of the sport. And on the West Slope, we really have seen it by those numbers going from 3 brackets of round robin and in 2 years going to 11 brackets where only 1 was round robin and the rest were 8-man brackets and 2 of them were 16-man brackets. So the West Slope coaches, girls programs, were kind of in favor of keeping it the way it is to promote the growth.
Add to that too, kind of from the Eastern Plains side, we saw some similarities at the Lyman Middle School tournament this year. Lyman actually created an entire women's division at their middle school tournament. And I want to say it was like 6 girls, 5 to 6 girls in 8-man brackets. It was really impressive. I don't know if like awkwardness in waiting times or officials wanting to move it along is necessarily just to break it down. I also think with growth coming, if we kind of keep it consistent as we move on, we're going to figure out other ways to tweak it and make it better. So I would prefer staying in the 4. We went to Yuma. I would just want to give Yuma a huge shout out. They did a great job running their region. They did it in their historical arena, which was super, super cool. Broke it down to a final mat under the light for first and second place matches. They handled wrestlebacks really well. I think they said the lull in it kind of increased their concession stand sales, which is nice for them. So their school got to make a little bit of money. But I would also echo, I would hate to change this next year and then potentially see, right, 23 teams in a region, and that could potentially be 18 105 pounders. I mean, I hope and pray, or 18 100 or 23 125 pounders, because we see a big fluctuation in that size, and then be like, oh crap, now we're in 32-man brackets, similar to what we had last year before we went to divisions. And those 32-man brackets qualifying for state was tough. And so I would prefer staying in the 4, and I think folks on the Eastern Plains would prefer that too.
And I'm going to echo the same thing. We ran our middle school girls tournament this past Friday, and it was incredible. The number of girls. We're in a process of building this. I think we have a couple issues. We're going to have some struggles as we build. If we start cutting back, it might hurt the growth. And also, if you're looking at the 2A side, there was years they didn't fill brackets. Nobody talked about cutting. Okay, I think we may have issues with that. I think we need to mirror the boys' programs and use them, continue on. I don't think we should treat the girls differently. I think we need to keep moving ahead, keep growing. We do see great growth. Growth in girls is just, it's incredible. And I don't think we need to curb it. I think in a few years, we're going to be looking at splitting classifications again. If we continue on the trajectory, this isn't the time to start cutting. And also our problem, I'm just going to throw this as a side thing. We had the discussion about the district schools earlier. Had those district schools split their teams, we could have potentially filled those brackets. And I know there's nothing in bylaws that can change that, but I think we need to encourage those teams to split, especially in the 4A level, when you have 2 or 3 girls deep at every weight. I know they want to win. They need, the best thing for the sport is for those teams to split their girls give their second team girls opportunities. When there's girls on JV that are not competing at regional tournaments because there's co-op team, there's something wrong with that. So we need to do our best to encourage those district teams to split. They could have I know they could have 3 or 4. They could have 5 or 6 and be the size of my team or even bigger than my team. And that would facilitate filling those brackets. And I know that's a different thing and there's not a lot we can do about it, but we can sure encourage it.
I think it's difficult to force a school to take a team though. I don't disagree with everything you said. I think it's just liability wise, if they don't have coaches or a facility or something like that, it becomes difficult. But again, I agree with everything you said.
I think the other thing too, when you start to split the teams, is your competition level doesn't end up staying the same. And we still want to keep that competition level to its highest level. So when you split off to a JV team and you're bringing some of those less experienced girls in, your competition level changes and it doesn't hold that same equity as it would for the boys. That would be my only concern in splitting some of those, just to fill the numbers, if that makes sense.
I know for my team this year, we're, 5A, we are a district-wide team or a co-op team. We pull from 6 high schools. We started the year with 26 athletes. 3/4 of my athletes this year had never even seen a wrestling match before. They just came out for the team because they wanted to. This was also the first year of JV state. And I think we ended up wrestling 7 girls at our own regions because we decided to have the other half of our varsity lineup wrestle at JV state because that's where they would have had more success and would have had better matches. And the host of JV state very explicitly stated that they did not want you sending girls to JV state and then having them wrestle at a region. We could have bumped the numbers at our region personally just by wrestling our JV experience level girls at JV state and at our region. So I think that was another potential thing with numbers. At JV state, there were multiple teams from our region that took girls to JV state. I don't know how many were doubled up at weight classes. We personally don't have very much double up, and definitely not 2 varsity experience level girls at the same weight class. We just don't.
Well, it seems like the consensus right now is really just to leave it at 4. And then continue to watch the growth and go there. I don't know if we want to, again, I don't know if we want to talk about potentially doing any of those opening up for 1-day tournaments or not. I know that we still have a squeeze on officials. So I don't know if that's something we want to look at with our regional setups right now. Is there a way for us to open things up for the officials, or if it is, we are going to continue to ask them to try and help grow the ranks and get us some more bodies and get more people trained up and give it another year and see what it looks like, or what we want to do there. So those options are out there.
We went for us last year, we were a 1-day regional and it was tight and it was cramped and it was rough. Where the 2-day going in for the girls, they had the recovery time, they had the ability to really plan out what they were doing, you know what I mean? Versus having that bunched into one, the boys are doing the same thing where they've got the 2 days and the girls really felt like, why can't wait? So we have to look at the equity of it as well. Just because the numbers aren't there and we can squeeze time in and make it fit, doesn't always mean that it's right for them physically or mentally on that aspect.
We'll also add, I think there's real power in having to practice a 2-day weigh-in before a 3-day weigh-in at the state tournament, especially since a lot of girls tournaments aren't two days in our season. It's very impactful for these young ladies to practice that and to see what it's going to be like before going into a 3-day weigh-in. I don't know if LD's on, but I wanted to share girls 4A Region 4 had some outstanding refs. Very high quality. I really enjoyed, they ran a great tournament. They had high expectations. They were asking coaches to remove hats in the corner. They were really preparing our region for the state tournament. So I did want to give a big shout out for the 4A Region 4 refs. They did a phenomenal job. And so I would like to see the impact on refs, but I think who we have coming in is really high quality and they're being trained really well. And wanted to tell them thank you so much for that.
Just to reiterate growth, yesterday at the middle school peak to peak, girls brackets were all 16-man brackets. So when we talk about the girls growing exponentially, I think that's a great indication of keep the trajectory that we're on because it will continue to grow.
Any other discussion then? I mean, really kind of sounds like status quo for girls regionals moving into next year. And I guess if something changes, we can talk about it then. Sound good? Okay, so we'll move on to letter E. This is something that John and Sandy and I talked a little bit about. And securing host sites for regionals at times can be rather challenging. There is constant turnover in coaches, constant turnover in athletic directors. Putting on a regional wrestling tournament is a big task. And so we wanted to discuss the thought of waiting to get regional host sites determined until the fall to allow the turnover of potentially coaches and athletic directors to take place and get those people, in their seats and start reaching out in the fall to determine when we select those regional host sites and get that piece going. I think they did a great job this year of being organized and getting that out to everybody and having everybody get their votes in and do all of those pieces. But there were still just a few issues because of turnover. And frankly, I think some people forgot they had agreed to host. And so it made their job a little bit more challenging in the fall than probably it should have been. Does anyone see great concern with waiting until the fall? I know they would get that out plenty early. You'll know after today what your region's going to look like, just not where you're at, but they would get that to you in plenty of time. Probably October-ish?
I would say earlier than that, to be
Okay.
honest with you. I think once athletic directors get settled in, I would think at the latest mid-September, probably early September.
Is the process going to be the same where you can put your name in the hat to host?
Yeah, so to essentially keep things as consistent as possible, Sandy and I basically took that over. And we reached out, said who wants to host, and then at the same time, we sent everything out to the schools for voting in that process, rather than putting it on the athletic director to send this stuff out, just so we could get some consistency with timing and everything. So that would stay the same. I think we also, school year's obviously more fresh in the fall than it is right now. And there's a lot of athletic directors and coaches that are burned out. So the thought of hosting anything next year is like, heck no, I'm not doing that. Whereas if we can approach it in the fall, I think we would get a greater variety. There were some regions where everything was in one location. That's not a regional. I think we need to do everything we can to try and get the different parts of the state to host. And 2A and 3A are great. And then after that, it's a little bit hit or miss.
Well, I know for us, for the girls, they had 2 regionals at one site, and although it was great to see some of those matches, you had Broomfield, Greeley West, Meade, Loveland, which were all up north, travel down to Fountain. So
we asked people if they would host.
No, I know.
And that's the thing. It's like nobody gets back to us. So then we asked Fountain Fort Carson, well, can you host 2? Because they had done it the weekend before. Or we knew they were doing it the weekend before, and they said yes. So that's the point, though. You're exactly right. If we could get somebody else to host, then we wouldn't have that. So Rachel just volunteered.
I've
me
got it.
to-
2 host state regional. Got it.
My AD said we were gonna host, so I'm like, let's do it.
You guys hosted this year too with
Yeah,
on the
for
boys
boys.
side, so that, thank you.
As someone who hosted a neutral site, for me, knowing that I'm hosting early on is better, so I can tell Otero, can you not schedule basketball games? So usually I like to know earlier, and I don't know how early they do their basketball schedule, but for me, on a neutral site, earlier is better.
Volunteers we have.
Yeah.
Well, you do a great job.
That was easy. Thanks for speaking up.
We may get this done before we leave today.
And I want to give Eric Villalpando at Walsenburg that ran the 2A region down there, the utmost kudos. He was transparent. He was communicative. We had information on preceding before the tournament happened. He did the drawing, the buys. I mean, completely transparent. While all the coaches were there, nothing but great praise to him from all the coaches in the region. So, fantastic job there.
And per recommendation of the committee last year, we did a Zoom this year for hosts, and I don't know if it helped, but it may add some consistency to places. So thank you, Ron.
I guess my only thing on that is the sooner the better. I mean, I think for some of our school sites that have the facilities, we've got shopping at the Fit to get in at Greeley West. I want to host next year, but I would prefer earlier than later.
I think JJ, one thing I can communicate out when I send my, I guess, recall of this meeting is, can communicate to ADs. These are the dates for regionals. If you think you may want to host, kick basketball out and have these dates available, or do I don't know, Friday morning game.
Well, I think unless there's just major concerns, I think we give John and Sandy that leeway to see if that works better for them. And as always, they'll take some feedback back. And if it doesn't work any better and need to go back to the other way, then I think they would be willing to do so. Moving on to letter F, are there other discussion items that were not on the agenda that the committee wanted to touch base on before we get into just kind of the last couple parts of our agenda? John, Sandy, anything else before we move forward out of discussion items? No? Okay. So letter X there is the list of the regions based on the snake and returning points for next year. 3A will need to be amended to the 16 teams, and that'll be reflected in the final packet that goes to Legislative Council. So John and I and Sandy will make sure that that's in there and reflects that. Otherwise, you've got that breakdown there. And that's really just kind of for you to review. I do want to make sure that you understand that once they make those regional determinations, if it makes sense that a geographical adjustment needs to happen with a certain team outside of the snake, that they have the leeway to do so. That way Rusty doesn't have to go over 7 passes just to get to his regional when he could go over 2.
And I think that's pretty much understood. They've made adjustments over the years, and I think people know.
Yep. So just, again, keep checking back, and usually they touch base with the host school and those schools that are affected. And then it's really up to coaches to double check, probably that when the bulletin is published to see where, if there's been any changes. It does look like we've got Estes Park girls coming in for 4A.
Mhm.
I see that note down there. So that is good news. We've got another team coming in. Let's just keep growing the girls. Sounds fantastic. We'll move into 11 unless anybody else has anything else. I just want to thank all of our committee members that are stepping off the committee after this year. Jason, Rachel, Sean, and Curtis here your expertise and your viewpoints have been extremely valuable to us over the last couple of years. And we will definitely know we're hearing from you in the background, even though you won't be here in the seat. And because Curtis is all gas and no brakes, okay? He can't help but let us know. All right, with that, I will call us adjourned. And again, thank you for your time. And I hope everyone travels home safely and has a good rest of their year. Thank you. Don't forget to mic or mute your